The school was empty long before midnight. Desks stood in perfect lines, the smell of chalk and dust clinging to the air. Outside, the faint hum of distant traffic was the only reminder that life still existed beyond those brick walls. Inside, silence ruled completely. Faraz, the school's janitor, had worked there for 20 years. He was used to being the last one in the building. Every night, after the teachers and children left, he swept through the same halls, cleaned the same rooms, locked up the same spaces. But tonight, something about the quiet was wrong. It wasn't peaceful, it was watchful. As he pushed his cleaning cart down the main corridor, the rubber wheels made a dull squeal against the floor. The sound bounced back strangely, as if the hallway itself was breathing in rhythm with him. He stopped. The air felt heavier than before, dense, almost alive. He looked over his shoulder. No one was there, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that the empty hall was holding its breath, waiting. When he entered Class 8B, a chill ran through him. The moment he crossed the threshold, it felt like the room had been expecting him. Rows of chairs stood silent, their shadows long and uneven under the faint ceiling light. But in the far corner, something drew his eye, a single wooden chair that looked slightly out of place. The others were stacked neatly, but this one remained alone, facing slightly sideways as if turned by an unseen hand. He remembered the stories. The students used to whisper about that chair, calling it the last seat. No one ever sat there twice. Some said it belonged to a boy who disappeared years ago. Others said the chair simply moved on its own. Faraz shook his head and smiled wearily. Just stories, he whispered, forcing a chuckle. But when he turned to his mop bucket, he noticed his reflection in the classroom window. And behind him, faintly, another shape stood still. Faraz blinked hard and looked again at the glass. The shape behind him was gone. Maybe it had never been there. Still, his heartbeat refused to calm. He turned toward the far corner where that lonely chair sat, slightly tilted, its back leg uneven as if it had been dragged across the floor too many times. A faint scrape mark beneath it glimmered in the light. He moved closer, telling himself he only wanted to straighten it, make the room tidy before leaving. But the nearer he got, the colder the air became. The chill wasn't from the window. It came from the chair itself, as if it absorbed warmth from everything around it. The smell in the room changed too. It was subtle, like damp earth after rain, the kind that clings to your clothes long after you've gone home. He stopped about a foot away. The seat of the chair was clean, too clean, like someone had just wiped it down. No dust, no fingerprints. Faraz frowned. He was certain he hadn't cleaned it in weeks. He crouched to check the floor. That's when he noticed something. Two faint footprints pressed into the dust beside the legs of the chair. Bare feet. Small. Like a child's. He froze, eyes fixed on the prints. They weren't old. The edges were crisp, fresh. His breath caught in his throat. Maybe one of the kids came back, he whispered, but the words felt absurd. It was nearly midnight. No one could be here. Faraz straightened up slowly, his knees trembling. He stepped back once, twice, then stopped. The chair wasn't tilted anymore. It was facing him directly. For a long moment, nothing moved. The light flickered faintly, and in that flicker, the chair seemed closer than before. Faraz blinked again. Only once, yet his shadow had shifted. Now there were two of them on the wall, one his own, and one seated quietly in the last row. Faraz stood frozen in the middle of the classroom. His breath trembled as he stared at the floor, where the second shadow should not have been. The air felt thicker now, humid, heavy, pressing against his skin like unseen hands. He tried to convince himself that it was just the dim light playing tricks, but the human mind knows when something is truly wrong. He forced himself to move, dragging the mop across the floor to erase the footprints. The wet streaks should have washed them away. Yet, even as the floor glistened, the prints remained, darker than before. They seemed to sink into the tiles, almost pulsing. A faint sound reached his ears, a creak, low and irregular. He turned toward the row of chairs. One of them had shifted slightly forward. He hadn't seen it move, but he knew it had. A cold film of sweat spread across his forehead. The mop slipped from his hand, clattering softly. Faraz crouched, bringing his face closer to the floor. The marks weren't just footprints now. They spread outward, like veins, thin, branching cracks that glowed faintly gray under the light. He touched one with his fingertip. It felt cold, but alive. For a fleeting moment, He thought he felt a faint vibration, like something moving beneath the surface. Then the light above him dimmed slightly, not flickered, just faded. The edges of the room darkened, and the cold deepened. Faraz stood up abruptly, heart pounding. The sound of the mop rolling away echoed in the silence. And then he saw it. Under the last row, where the strange chair waited, the floorboards were bending, softly rising and falling, like something beneath them was breathing. He took a step back, but the movement stopped. The air went still again, and from the dark corner came the faint sound of a wooden leg scraping against the floor, once slow and deliberate. Faraz didn't look away this time. The chair was facing him again. Faraz's hands were trembling, though he barely noticed. His eyes were locked on that solitary chair at the back of the room. The air between them seemed thicker, like heat rippling above asphalt, but it wasn't warmth he felt. It was the opposite. A deep, bone-cutting chill seeped into his veins, making his skin prickle. He tried to steady his breathing, muttering under his breath, "It's just old wood, nothing else." But as he spoke, a faint creak answered him, soft, uneven, as if the chair had understood. The sound wasn't loud, but it crawled straight through his chest. He turned away, desperate to focus on something ordinary. The broom, the bucket, anything. Yet even with his back turned, he could feel it, the weight in the room shifting. It was like the air had grown heavier only around that corner, pressing outward in slow waves. His shoulders ached, as though gravity itself had deepened. He glanced down at his feet and froze. The fine layer of dust on the floor was moving, tiny grains rolling toward the back of the classroom, drawn by something unseen. The movement was subtle, almost gentle, but unmistakable. It was like the earth itself was being pulled in that direction. Then came the smallest, most human sound he could imagine, the faint exhale of a sigh. It wasn't loud, but it was close, right beside him, near his ear. Faraz flinched, stepping forward instinctively, his body stiff with terror. He turned sharply. Nothing. Just rows of empty chairs staring back at him. But when he looked back at the lone chair, he noticed something that hadn't been there before. The seat wasn't empty anymore, not completely. The light caught the faint outline of two small handprints pressed against the wood, pale and new, as if someone invisible had just leaned forward and rested their hands there. And though Faraz didn't move, the chair creaked again, just once, like it was breathing in. Faraz stood motionless, his breath shallow and uneven. The classroom had become a hollow space, filled with a silence that seemed to pulse. His eyes locked onto the faint, pale handprints on the chair. They hadn't faded. They were darkening, growing clearer, as though whoever had placed them there was still pressing down. He forced himself to step closer. Each movement echoed too loudly, like his footsteps were happening inside his skull. The chair didn't move this time. It just waited. The entire room felt poised, expectant, as if holding something back. Then, something shifted. The sound was soft, not a creak, not a thump, but a gentle slide, the kind made by fabric brushing against a hard surface. Faraz turned his head slowly. The chairs around him had changed. Their angles were different, ever so slightly, like they'd all rotated just enough to face him. His stomach dropped. A draft of cold air passed through, though no window was open. His shirt fluttered against his back. That's when he noticed the papers pinned on the bulletin board. They were trembling, moving in opposite directions, as though the air itself was being pulled apart. Faraz whispered, "Who's here?" His voice broke the silence, and instantly, something responded. Not with a sound, but a motion. The chair at the back lifted just slightly, then came down with a hollow thud. Once, twice. The rhythm of someone impatiently tapping their foot, except the sound came from the wood itself, not the floor. His chest tightened. He stumbled backward, knocking into a desk. The impact made a noise, and suddenly, the other chairs began to shift too, one after another, scraping forward without a single sound leaving their legs. Silent motion. Silent approach. Faraz clutched his chest, frozen. Every chair had turned completely toward him now. And in the back, the empty one, the forgotten chair, tilted forward, like someone unseen was rising slowly to stand. Faraz's breathing quickened until each inhale sounded like a gasp. The air was no longer still, it pulsed. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his body disobeyed. It felt as if the atmosphere itself had thickened, turning the space around him into something heavy, almost liquid. He tried to move his legs, but they responded sluggishly, like wading through cold water. The forgotten chair stood only a few feet away now. Its shadow stretched unnaturally long across the floor, touching his shoes. He wanted to step back, but his knees refused. He could feel something, not air, not wind, brushing against his ankles. It was faint but undeniable. A presence. Faraz swallowed hard and reached forward, trembling. His fingertips hovered over the top of the chair. He only wanted to prove to himself that nothing was there, that it was just an object, just furniture. See? Nothing, he muttered, his voice cracking. But the moment his fingers touched the wood, something touched him back. It wasn't a simple feeling. It was cold, impossibly cold, and it moved. Thin, sharp, deliberate, like fingers tracing his skin in reverse, from inside to out. He yanked his hand back, heart hammering, but the chill stayed, spreading up his arm like ice threading through veins. His skin turned pale where it had touched the chair. Then came the grip. Invisible, firm, clutching his wrist. He gasped, twisting, but there was nothing to see. Only the dent in his sleeve, where unseen fingers pressed into the fabric. The chair didn't move, but the floor beneath it creaked as if someone had shifted their weight. The cold climbed his shoulder. Faraz's vision blurred for a second, and in that haze, he saw something impossible, a faint outline sitting on the chair. A figure with no face, no color, only shape. It leaned forward, and before Faraz could scream, the unseen hand let go, almost gently, as if inviting him to sit. Faraz stumbled backward, clutching his wrist where the cold had entered him. The invisible touch was gone, yet its chill remained deep beneath his skin, as if it had seeped into the bones themselves. The classroom looked unchanged, but it no longer felt empty. Something unseen had taken its place within the silence. He could hear it now, not footsteps, not creaks, but the faint rhythm of breathing. It wasn't his own. Slow, calm, close. It filled the air like a whispering tide, brushing softly past his ear, then retreating again. Every hair on his neck rose. He turned toward the sound. Nothing. Just rows of still chairs, shadows draped across the floor like resting bodies. He tried to tell himself he was losing his mind. You're tired, that's all. You just need sleep, he whispered. But even his own voice sounded foreign, borrowed, as though the room were repeating it after him. Faraz backed toward the window. The glass was faintly fogged from the cold. As he looked closer, his heart froze. There were marks on the inside of the window, tiny oval smudges, perfectly shaped, as if someone had pressed their lips there and exhaled slowly. The fog moved outward in short, measured bursts, as though the unseen figure was still breathing on the glass. He spun around, heart slamming against his ribs. The chair was different again. It wasn't at the far corner anymore. It was 2 rows closer. The faint scrape marks on the floor showed its path, inch by inch, moving toward him without sound. The breathing stopped. Silence returned, heavier than before. Faraz's reflection in the window trembled faintly, not from movement, but because there was another reflection standing beside his. Taller, featureless. Still, he turned in panic. But the classroom behind him was empty. Only the faint warmth of someone else's breath lingered on his cheek. By the time sunlight reached the old school, everything seemed normal again. The classrooms were clean, the hallways quiet, and the faint smell of disinfectant lingered in the air, proof that Faraz had done his work the night before. The students filed in as usual, laughing, dropping their bags, unaware of the cold echo still hidden in the walls. In Class 8B, the morning light poured through the windows. The desks gleamed. The chair in the last row stood perfectly still, facing forward like it always had. Nothing looked disturbed, yet something about the air carried a strange heaviness, like a secret trying to stay quiet. When the homeroom teacher, Mr. Halim, walked in, he felt it immediately. He paused for a moment before speaking, as though someone had whispered a warning in his mind. But he brushed it off, greeting the class. "Good morning, everyone." The children answered in unison. Then he opened the attendance register. His pen hovered over the first name when he froze. There, written neatly in the middle of the list, was a name that didn't belong. Faraz Ahmed. The handwriting was precise, in black ink, the same kind the teachers used, yet Mr. Halim hadn't written it. Neither had anyone else. He frowned, scanning the room, half expecting someone to laugh, to admit it was a prank. But no one moved. The students looked confused, curious. "Who wrote this?" he asked, showing the page. Silence. A girl in the second row slowly raised her hand. "Sir," she said softly. "Wasn't that the name of the cleaner?" The teacher's stomach tightened. He turned his gaze toward the back of the room, to the last row. The empty chair sat quietly in its corner, untouched, its shadow stretching farther than it should have in the daylight. For a moment, he thought he saw someone sitting there, a faint outline, like heat in the air. But when he blinked, it was gone. He looked back down at the register. The name, Faraz Ahmed, had vanished. A week passed. The school carried on as though nothing had happened. Faraz's disappearance was spoken about only in whispers outside the building, never within it. The administration quietly said he'd left for family reasons. No one believed it, but no one questioned it either. By Friday, a new janitor had been hired, a tall, quiet man named Rashid. He was younger, stronger, and unlike Faraz, didn't believe in stories. Just superstition. He laughed when a teacher joked about the haunted chair in Class 8B. But the laughter didn't last long. That evening, Rashid stayed late to finish his shift. The halls emptied one by one. As he entered Class 8B, the lights dimmed slightly, casting long shadows across the room. He began sweeping, humming softly to himself. The sound echoed strangely, as though bouncing from a deeper place than the walls. When he reached the last row, he stopped. The air grew colder, not freezing, just dense, like the moment before a storm. His broom handle trembled in his grip. He stared at the old wooden chair sitting quietly at the back. It looked ordinary, but there was something off about it. The wood was darker, almost damp, and faint marks, hand-shaped, covered the arms. He leaned down to clean beneath it. His fingers brushed across the floor and came up covered in gray dust. Only it wasn't dust. It was ash. He straightened up slowly. The chair creaked once, sharp and low, like a breath caught in a throat. He frowned, stepping back, but the broom rolled away from his hand, gliding across the floor as though pulled. Then he saw it. Faint, like a reflection in glass, a figure sitting in the chair, motionless, head bowed. For a heartbeat, it looked like an old man in a janitor's uniform. Rashid blinked, and the chair was empty again. But from somewhere deep beneath the floor, something knocked. Once, then twice, like someone waiting to be let out. That night, no one saw Rashid leave the school. By morning, the building was open, the halls spotless, everything perfectly in place, except for Class 8B. When the students entered, they noticed it immediately. The chair at the back wasn't where it had been. It now stood closer to the middle, slightly turned, facing the front. No one had touched it. The teacher frowned, but said nothing. He'd learned not to. As class began, a boy raised his hand. "Sir," he whispered, "there's someone sitting there." The teacher followed his gaze. The chair was empty. But the boy's eyes were wide, fixed on something no one else could see. "He's right there," the boy said, voice trembling. "He's wearing blue clothes, he's cleaning." The teacher felt his stomach twist. He turned toward the attendance sheet on his desk and froze. A new name had appeared, freshly written beneath the vanished one. Rashid Khan. The air grew colder. The windows fogged without reason. A faint reflection shimmered on the glass. Two men standing behind the students, their outlines faint but undeniable. One old, one young, both motionless. The children began whispering, uneasy. The teacher shut the register quickly, but it didn't matter. From the back of the classroom came the unmistakable sound of wood sliding against the floor. Slow, measured. The chair was moving, not dragged, not pushed, gliding. Every child turned to look. The chair stopped at the final row. It faced forward again. Silence. Then, faintly, the chalk on the blackboard moved on its own, scrawling 3 words in uneven strokes. "Still cleaning here." The chalk fell. The room went dark for half a second. When the lights flickered back, the chair was empty, but 2 new shadows now rested on the wall behind it. And from that night on, every janitor the school hired vanished after a week. Some say he is still cleaning. Every Friday night, the chair moves on its own. Whoever sits there never comes back the next morning. The seat is never empty. Someone is always there, even if you can't see them. If you ever enter that classroom, don't look back, because the cleaning that started there has never truly ended. If this story gave you chills, make sure to subscribe to my channel, because the next story arrives after midnight.